Yes, sir.
Well, because when the city's got more assets,
Well, they have a lot more invested in the system.
yeah,
They're a lot larger group, but also they're better funded.
yeah.
Not only are they less expensive, and that's something you won't hear very much, they're actuarially less expensive, but also they've always made this full debt payment. And that's one of the big controversies. The way the actuaries set this up is each year they go through what's called an annual actuarial valuation that is exactly what we described. Year one, benefits 1.25. We think we're going to earn 4%. The employee needs to contribute 4%. The employer needs to contribute 4%. That'll give enough money to pay that benefit. And that's repeated every year. So the implication, not only from a mathematical standpoint and an actuarial standpoint, is that these people are going to retire with those benefits as they existed when the benefits are earned. But they never do. And so there are a lot of different ways they change that benefit, and we're talking primarily about one way, and that's with regard to the benefit factor, or the multiplier. Interestingly enough, the teacher system doesn't apply multipliers retroactively. So when they change a multiplier, and you can understand this, when they changed a multiplier in the 60s from 1.75 to 2, theirs are higher because they are not in the Social Security system. So they increase a multiplier, they don't apply that retroactively. So if you work 10 years, and that multiplier or benefit factor is 2, and then you work 20 years, and it's 2.5, you get 10 years of 2, and 20 years of 2.5. Now that makes a lot of sense. Now they did some other things that created a disparity between their funding and their benefits, but they didn't make that mistake. So let's say you're an actuary, and you're performing one of these, oh, I'm sorry, I have a question.
Did I hear you right? Did you say that there were ranges of return, and that the powers that be said, okay, we'll count on the higher range?
They didn't say they would count on the higher range, they said they would promise the highest benefit, and then if they weren't making the range, the system, that means you have a funding deficiency, because if they give a benefit, let's say for example, this is a real person, and they work this 9-year period of time, and you're a Kentucky Retirement System beneficiary working these 9 years. You don't get 2 years of 1.25, 2 years of 1.6, and so on. You get 9 years of 2. And so you can imagine there's a deficiency in funding, not created because we didn't make the payroll contributions. There was never a lack of this payroll contribution. This is called the normal cost. And so what actuaries are doing to some degree is a sleight of hand, because the legislators don't understand this. They never look. They understand. They don't have time. I understand it. Nobody's as hard-headed as I am to go back and look at these things. But you can imagine this 9-year individual beneficiary worked 9 years, and they get 2 for all 9 years. So assuming you meet your assumptions, in other words, your investment return assumption, how long people are going to work until they retire, how long they're going to live after they're retired, how much they're going to make when they retire, those assumptions are all critical factors. But let's assume you meet every one of those. You don't have enough money, because you gave everyone in the system a 2 in this hypothetical example when you should have been giving them what they earn. So they actually have a benefit that exceeds what they earn.
So why is that allowed?
That's a good question. Well, I will tell you this, and we're not advocating for this, because we have come to the conclusion, and of course I'm a math person, so I'm not very flexible with numbers. So I have a hard time understanding why you would do this. But once you have people who retired, and now they receive this benefit, it's hard to pull it back. But I will tell you, for any of these systems, if you were to go back and recalculate benefits and give people what they actually earned, we would have a surplus, because we've exceeded our investment return assumptions. Now, there is a caveat to that. With the K-non-HAS system, once you get to a low point with funding, you have a cash flow problem. So now you're spending money, you're reinvesting into different types of investments, you're putting your money in cash because you have to pull your investments out to pay people. You weren't supposed to be doing them. Each person, these are all commingled accounts. There's not a single account for each individual person, but all this money is together, and you can imagine this is going to start pulling more money out of the system than went in. The second part of every valuation, the valuation is really important. It happens every year. The actuaries do this. But what they're looking at is, how much do I need to pay for this year's benefits, and how much do I owe for all prior years? So you can imagine, if you go down to year 5, and you decide that you need 4% from the employee and 4% from the employer for that year, but then you look back and everybody got a 2 instead of what you funded, you're going to have debt. So this becomes a debt problem. Then you've heard the term actuarially required contribution, or ARC. So what is the ARC? The ARC is simply an amortization of the debt that the system needs to have enough assets to meet all of its future benefit obligations. So this debt. So if you look back on any of these years, once you change things retroactively, you've gone back and you've changed them, you're going to have unfunded liabilities, which is a fancy actuarial term for debt. You owe money, and you're going to amortize that. You want to amortize, that's like a mortgage. So you're going to set up payments, and that's charged entirely to the taxpayers. So the employees don't have to pay more when that happens, but the employers do. And we're the employers. So we're the state, we're the cities. So all the tax money, that's why that number keeps increasing, because they've actually met their investment return assumptions, and they've met most of their other assumptions. I will tell you, longevity is always a problem with defined benefit plans, and we're going to discuss why that's a major problem. Once you get through year 5, because of this inviolable contract, they believe that once you enter into the system, you're endowed with whatever benefit exists when you walk in the door, but that's a floor, and there's no ceiling. So as you go through your career, if that number increases, all of your numbers increase, but if the number decreases, your numbers never decrease. So the benefits increase, they never decrease, and the increases are applied retroactively and prospectively for everybody in the system, with a few exceptions that we can discuss. So we're not opposed to defined benefit systems, and we're not opposed to compensating people fairly. But we don't think that's a legitimate financial instrument, because the valuation suggests one thing, and the benefits awarded at the end suggest another. Which brings us to transparency. Of course, we're very big advocates for transparency, but we're the taxpayers, and as we said, we're 100% responsible for all debt. We pay 100% of the debt. So any of these mistakes that were made come to us, but we can't see their benefits. We can't see their benefit calculations. So you can't have a retiree from the KRS system or the TRS system making $150,000 and ask, I'd like to know what they make and how that was calculated, even though you pay for it. I can't get it.
Okay. That does.
Okay. This one? Okay. So this is a summary of how the benefits are calculated. Remember, we're talking about the benefit factors, those little numbers, 1.25% to 2% of your final average salary. And that's multiplied by the number of years you work, your years of service. So if you work 30 years and have a 2% multiplier, you get 60% of your final average salary. And the last part of that is your final compensation. That's generally calculated either by averaging the high 5 years of salary or the high 3 years. Generally, for the non-hazardous beneficiaries, it's 5, and for hazardous, it's 3. But keep in mind that there's never enough money, because unless you exceed your investment return assumptions by a very large margin or pump a lot of money into the system, each person who retires takes more out than was put in on their behalf.